Hello again, Internet. It's me again, still sober, so should be a little less rambly tonight. You may hear a bell from time to time. We have a cat now, so this is the time she's up too. Uh, let's talk about writing some more. Uh, might be changing the title of the Something Horrible things to something else since I'm going a little more away from horror and a bit more into general writing concepts. Uh, if you're new to the video, talking about writing, and general concepts and narrative with a horror emphasis, because that's my obsession, but nothing is specific to a genre until you start getting into things like sex scenes. That'd be kind of specific to erotica, depending on kind of how much of a sex scene it is, how much is euphemism, and how much is straight fucking. So, last week we talked about a bunch of stuff, and the question of the statement of natural dialogue came up, and someone in the comments made the point of expository dialogue, because I was talking about exposition and natural dialogue being the best way to deliver it. They made the point, while I gibber, that can actually end up damaging the fourth wall, and you're absolutely right. So to start off, we're going to talk about what the fourth wall is for anyone out there who's still not sure or only has the most cursory understanding. The fourth wall isn't just what Deadpool and Deadpool Breaks and She-Hulk broke back in the 80s. The fourth wall comes from the theater, and it's the wall between the stage and the audience. It's the thing that blocks them, metaphorically, from noticing that you're there. So to break the fourth wall is when in theater is when the actors turn to the crowd and acknowledge them. It's become more common nowadays in theater, as far as I understand. I have a kid, so I mostly just go to kids' theater, and those people talk to those kids constantly. So that's a thing. There's another one, in case you're keeping tally. But what we're talking about is the willing suspension of disbelief in literature. The idea that unless a reader is absolutely batshit insane, they're not gonna believe your writing is real. Now there are certain circumstances. You're writing new journalism, for instance. You're writing something based in the real world, or something based on the real world, or similar to Whitley Strieber wrote a book called Communion. That's not what I'm talking about. I wrote a book called Majestic. The opening of the book is literally just the author, the fictional author inside the book, saying, "Oh, this is all fiction because my lawyer said if I wrote it as nonfiction, I'd go to jail. So it's all fiction." Kind of blurring that line. And again, that's a fourth wall. Not only break, but also set up. They used a break of the fourth wall to set up the rest of the story. If it's done well, if it's done artfully, breaking the fourth wall can enhance a story. The Hobbit begins with a break of the fourth wall, technically, because it begins with an explanation of what a hobbit is, written by Bilbo Baggins. In case you're new to what a hobbit is, you've probably heard of an elf, you've probably heard of a dwarf, you're from all over Middle-earth, but you've never heard of a hobbit, because they're rare and they're not in the Silmarillion. And I'm getting off topic. But fourth wall is important because it allows a reader to kind of accept that this reality inside the story has a purpose. That there is that it can exist for the time while they're reading the story or watching the movie or what have you. Comic books, it's really easy to break the fourth wall because there's an easy disconnect to separate, and it doesn't really break the rhythm of the book, the rhythm of the story as much. But in a novel and things like that, having the characters specifically turn to the audience or turn to the reader, it can be jarring. But again, there are authors who do it fantastically. Sherry Priest, her Eden Moore series, which is an urban fantasy series about a Woman Who Can See the Dead. The entire series is told as as Eden Moore herself having a conversation with you, the viewer, about the story. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Not Rothfuss by Patrick Rothfuss. His entire story is an interview. And that's just, using the fourth wall to help establish your setting, using a breach of the fourth wall to an extent, where basically you can engage, you establish a narrative where you can engage the reader specifically. Eden Moore, they don't even bother to explain to who she's fucking talking to. She's just like, this. She never mentions you, but it's done in a very conversational tone, and it's all talking about I. It sounds like she's telling you the story, like you're sitting there having a drink with her or something. Again, I'd say I'm getting off topic, but I'm not, because we're talking about dialogue, honestly, at the end of the day. That's what this is about. Using the fourth wall to explain exposition and dialogue. Again, for those of you who don't know, an exposition is anything in a story that is meant to explain something, basically. Exposition isn't two characters talking about what they had for dinner unless it's important to the story. But exposition is when a character walks in and someone's like, hey, how's Sam? And the other guy's like, my son Sam? That's an exposition. And it's also unnatural dialogue. If you know each other and the other person's calling the person by their first name, you can probably assume that you should have set up that relationship another way. But that's exposition, and that's also unnatural dialogue. Anytime a narrator chimes in to tell you the big events of the story, that's exposition, and that can be very unnatural, depending on how you've set it up. Again, 300 honestly didn't do that bad a job of setting up the narrator, because they actually set up a narrator. Some movies don't do as well. It's just how things go. It's why CinemaSins always dings for narration, because narration is kind of hit or miss, and you should avoid it if possible, unless, again, you have a framework of a character telling a story. The problem with having a character tell that story is that means that character has to survive to tell that story. So it kind of removes some suspense. Anyway, talking about natural dialogue. Natural dialogue is basically when dialogue is when two people talk. I swear to God, if you didn't know what that is, just close this down, turn off your internet, turn off your computer, and go to sleep. And just go to sleep. You didn't know dialogue is two people talking. Now maybe you've only heard the term in opening a dialogue. It's still two people talking. But in a story context, it's when two people engage each other in conversation, or 15,000 people engage each other in conversation, if you really want to be fucking confusing to your readers. Natural dialogue is dialogue that sounds natural for the setting. It really is as simple as that. And that's when we get into something we're going to be talking about over several videos here and there, is the internal mythology. I think I've mentioned it before. Don't know if I've explained it. And a lot of this video is going to be explaining shit, apparently. The internal mythology of a setting is the way that world works. And you need a consistent one in order to maintain, again, the fourth wall. If you've created an urban fantasy, Sherry Priest does them, Anita Blake series, fucking Twilight's technically called urban fantasy. It's basically just modern day with fantasy elements. And in that world, there are no undead. You establish that repeatedly. Zombies are body corpses possessed by spirits. Vampires are closer to the original mythology, where they're ghosts. Well, if you suddenly reveal an undead, you're breaking your own rules, and now you have to explain that. And that's a lot of my problem with a lot of stuff that happens in popular media, especially for things that I'm a fan of, like comic books, when they get converted into a movie and there's a massive change. I don't care that there's a change. What I want is an explanation in the story. I want the story to justify that change. I don't care that Human Torch was made black. I cared that he was black with a white sister, and they were really kind of trying to be very secretive about how that was going to work. I'm like, just say one of them's adopted. That's all I need. Reveal there's a black dad. Okay. Or they're interracial and just happen to be literally a black and a white kid somehow. Uh, I always thought, because the whole thing was he's such a great actor, I'm just making Mr. Fantastic, that it doesn't matter, and you've got an interracial relationship. But neither here nor there. Um, but natural dialogue is dialogue that two people in that setting could have a conversation about. It's my main problem with the Bechdel test. I have hung around with, uh, well, every woman I've been with, I've hung around with, and I've hung around with their friends, and I've never really hung around with a group of people where there are two women who at some point in an evening they don't end up talking about a guy they know or a husband or a boyfriend or something, even if it's just a coworker, and that coworker oftentimes will happen to be a man. Well, that fails the Bechdel test unless they also, now that's natural dialogue to me. um, it also establishes, you can also use that to establish career. You can use that to establish how they feel about their coworkers. You can use that to establish how they engage with each other and what they agree on and how they get along. Uh, and again, Bechdel test basically says at some point in the movie, they have to have a conversation that's not about men, which is fine. And honestly, you don't have to have the conversation about men. I have a friend who's like, well, that means life doesn't pass the Bechdel test. The idea with Bechdel test is they have to have a conversation that isn't about men at some point. And again, you can use that to establish their jobs or things like that. But having them show up and go, man, isn't it great to be cab drivers? That's not natural. No one fucking says that. No one goes to hang out with their coworkers and says, man, I've got a great job. They go to work, they go to hang out, and they bitch about coworkers, and they bitch about their bosses, and they bitch about their day. So if you want two cab drivers, or you want a person who's a cab driver, and you want to establish a cab driver, have them talk about a fare they had to pick up, who was really difficult. Things like that. Things people actually fucking do. If you're doing a fantasy story, and, have them talk in the way they talk. Have them speak in the way they speak. Have them talk down to people if they talk down to people. If the story has slaves, have them be demeaning to people. Man's inhumanity to man, but natural conversation. And you can do all sorts of exposition through natural conversation without even making a hint at the fourth wall, because the best exposition is subtle. If you're watching a movie and you can point out the exposition, they're kind of doing it wrong, in my opinion. Sometimes there's no choice. Sometimes there's just no goddamn choice. But when there's an option for better, Ow! When there's an option for better, I prefer better. Hold on. Alright. You want to get up here so bad, say hi. This is Dahlia. I didn't name her. Did you bring me your toy? We'll play in a minute, alright? But yeah. Yes, you can end up breaking the fourth wall bad with bad exposition. You absolutely can. You can end up destroying someone's ability to engage themselves in your story and your writing and your work if your exposition is bad. But the same is true of any component of your writing. If you're not willing to put the time in to craft it, you're going to just destroy the fourth wall right out of the gate. If you're going to put it bad writing, you're going to have sloppy exposition. That's going to risk destroying the fourth wall. If you're not going to be consistent with the way that your world works, that's going to destroy your fourth wall. And so your best bet is to work on a story Bible and a world Bible. And we're going to get into that in the next video, which we'll probably actually end up recording tonight or tomorrow. Tonight, probably. And probably end up uploading because I don't apparently believe in doing a buffer, I guess. I don't fucking know. I don't know why I do this shit, so. But, yeah, so dialogue. I'm going to get back to that before we wrap up. Picture the conversation in your head. That's the best explanation I can do. Picture the conversation. Have the conversation with one of your friends. Listen to people talk and how people talk. Picking up colloquialisms. Looking up colloquialisms for the time period you're writing in. Not being afraid to use offensive language. A language that would be offensive now. If you're setting a story in the 50s, you might have a character call a black guy a spade. It's racist now. It's probably kind of racist then, but that's the language they used. That's what makes it natural. And when you try to go back and change that, you're kind of drawing people out of the story. If you're having people, it's like a Robin Hood Men in Tights, not Men in Tights, Prince of Thieves. I like Men in Tights. I like Prince of Thieves too when I was a kid. But looking back on it as an adult, Kevin Costner cannot do a British accent. So there's this Brooklyn guy standing there trying to save all of England from Alan Rickman. And it doesn't... It's jarring. Vin Diesel in the Last Witch Hunter that just came out on DVD recently. It's really jarring to picture Vin Diesel as a immortal witch hunter. It's just that accent, that voice. I don't picture that being like a ancient person. The height too, because anthropology is another obsession of mine, but it doesn't it doesn't ring true for me, and so it's hard for me to invest in it. It's the same problem I have, like I said last video, with zombies and people who do zombie media that say, well, they're not zombies, they're this, they're walkers or they're biters or they're dead guys, or the corpses, or whatever the fuck. Call them zombies. Or set up in the story, in your narrative, why they're not goddamn called zombies, and have someone bring it up. The Romeo and Juliet zombie story, Warm Bodies? Warm Hearts? Something like that. Where love brings them back, kind of. Excuse me. That had a lot of narrative exposition because the main character couldn't talk, and he's your focus. He's your insert character, which is another thing that's important. We'll get to that. But it never feels natural. Like, it feels natural from his perspective, but, like, even he doesn't call them zombies. The Malkovich doesn't call them zombies. No one calls them goddamn zombies. But why not? Why the fuck not? They die like zombies, headshots. They're undead. They're zombies that walk around and eat people. Why aren't they zombies? Oh, because zombies never happened. Well, you don't fucking know that. Pet peeve. Getting off topic again. So yeah, basically, like I said, look at your world and build it accordingly. But the main thing we're talking about today is dialogue. And your dialogue, it really is... It's going to be a fucking 20-minute video of me just... Ultimately, the takeaway is... Listen. If you want two people from the South, they call dinner supper, they call lunch dinner, and brunch is a fairly common thing. Don't know why. From the South. Never fucking understood it. But that's an important thing for people who are going to look into that. If you're going to do a story with coal miners, look up coal miners slang. If you're going to do a story with police officers, learn some police codes. Learn some police dialectic. If you're going to do a story with a scientist character, have that scientist research lab slang and lab terms. Every job has their own little goddamn slang. My wife's an electrician. One of the places that they shop from, you can actually search by by the slang terms in their catalog online. Like, she told me that, and I'm just like, what? But it's really convenient because a lot of people don't know the actual official name for things. They only know the general terms. Like, she came home and she's like, I got my first pair of dikes. And I'm like, shit, where are they? We can have a party. Diagonal cutters. I'm like, oh, not what I was picturing. Fucking roto hammer. What do you picture when you're a roto hammer? It's not what I was picturing. Um, but yeah, that's basically that. We're gonna end this one on that note before I end up rambling for 40 minutes on 1,000 topics but dialogue. Again, with dialogue and exposition, you want your dialogue to be natural and your exposition to be subtle. You want to establish things in the universe as best as you can without having to literally just sit the reader down and make them read through a fucking explanation. How you do that's up to you. We're going to talk a little about perspective characters and world building in the next video that I'll be doing in about now